And we are in good company, and I consider myself a part of that company. I am standing on some mighty shoulders. We are standing on some mighty shoulders, and guess what? We have shoulders to build. It is not about us. It is not about our lifetime. It is not about what's happening today. So if you're looking out there for the results of what you're doing in your inner work and your practice today, to see the peace now, you are looking in the wrong place. It is about the people who will stand on our shoulders. And if that is not enough of an inspiration for you, then you don't belong here. So if you're sitting here, then you do belong here. And know that that's why we do this. This is not even my talk. This has got nothing to do with my talk. But I believe this with every fiber of my being. I do the work I do today for those who will stand on my shoulders tomorrow. Okay, now my head feels like it's going to explode off into a million pieces. and that's a good thing. All right, so the title of my talk has got something to do with DNA. I don't know, what did I call it? It's in the DNA, God is in, I don't know. It's about DNA, and it's really about protein. And the relationship between DNA and protein. And trust me, by the time we get to the end of it, it'll be about your spiritual practice, I promise. But I do love science, I love science as just as a scientific kind of person. I refer to myself as half scientist, half mystic, and that is exactly how I perceive myself, exactly half and half. And as such, I feel it as sort of a responsibility to bridge the gap between what sometimes looks like, feels like, and appears as if they are two separate domains. They are not. They are the same. They inform each other. And even if out there in the world, those, oh, hi. People up there, hello. Look up. All right. That even if the world out there doesn't always reflect that, I think that it is so. It is so that they are one and they are informing each other more and more and more. And what I'm hoping is that as science kind of pulled away from mysticism a couple of hundred years ago, that eventually we're getting back and closer and closer and closer, you know. And my job as a mystical scientist is to hopefully take some of the things that we know in science to be true today and draw parallels for you to have an appreciation of the mystical that's buried within it. So we start with DNA. I've always wanted to do a talk about DNA because everybody knows about DNA these days. It's been around for, a bunch of decades. It was in the middle of last century that the scientists discovered DNA. And it was thought that the DNA was the brain of the cell and was sort of in charge of everything, and genetics and your DNA make up who you are. Not true. It's really not true, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. But let's talk about DNA itself. We are filled with it. Every single cell in your body has a strip of DNA in it. And each cell has a lot of DNA. I mean, if you took the DNA in a single cell in your body and you sort of strung it out, it would be about 2 yards long. And this is probably longer than the span of my short little arms. Now, you've got about 10 trillion cells in your body. So if you were to take the DNA in your body and just sort of string it out in one long string, it would be long enough to get from here to the moon and back over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's a lot of DNA. Now, what's sort of kooky about scientists and their sort of perception of DNA is that in their examinations of this stuff that fills us up, they can only recognize about 3% of it is active in our experience as beings. And so that means 97% of it is, well, what I would say is 97% of it is in the mystery. We don't know yet. What scientists call it is junk. And that's like a scientific term. The junk DNA. Which is just hubristic and crazy, it's to me, it's delicious. that I feel sort of like this magnificent thing, this creature that can do all this stuff. And I'm only using 3% of my divinity. That's delicious, you know? So DNA was thought to sort of be the thing that made everything happen, because they do know this, and this is so. DNA causes proteins to be manufactured. So think about that. We are protein. We are proteins. And DNA is the thing that causes proteins to be manufactured. Over and over and over again. That's what DNA does. It's just a blueprint for the protein of the cell that it's in. It just says, make more, make more, make more. In an endless string throughout your life of this constant mechanism between itself and the replication of protein. Over and over and over again. What they found out not so long ago is that DNA really doesn't have anything to do with life at all. How'd they find this out? They took a cell and they took the DNA out. They expected the cell to die. It didn't. Not at all. It just kept going and going and going, doing its thing, doing what it knew to do. Whatever that particular cell was. It just kept on living. Now, eventually it died out. Why? Because proteins break down, just like us, our cars, our computers. You know, everything breaks down eventually, right? And there wasn't any DNA in there to say, okay, make more, make more. So what do we know now? Well, DNA is not the arbiter of life. It's inorganic. It is not living. But it's in us. We are living. We are protein-based stuff. And we have in us this enormous, almost seemingly infinite mechanism for replicating life over and over again. To me, that's God. And in science of mind, we understand God to be that infinite, creative possibility of life everlasting that responds to our creative demands of it. Replicating protein after protein after protein. No matter what. DNA doesn't say, oh, I don't like that order for protein. I'm not going to make that today. DNA won't even say, oh, that protein's broken, so I'm not going to make that anymore. I'm going to fix it. No, DNA will just keep making the broken protein if that's what the consciousness is. Right? Proteins, obviously, that seems to be the next sort of big topic of what I want to talk about, because proteins is where all the action is. Protein is where all the movement is. Proteins, in fact, do move. We move. And when we are moving because we are proteins in action. So like if I'm a protein and I'm sort of shaped like this, I then have a second shape that's sort of like this. And so if I get acted upon, I move. So let's just say I'm a muscle protein, right? And I'm sort of sitting there and the guy that I'm a part of is about to lift a shovel. Something activates this protein, and I go like this. And if you multiply that by a couple of trillion, muscles move. This is the mechanism of how life works. You see, got nothing to do with DNA. It's all conscious choice. I'm choosing to move the thing. The neurotransmitters and the chemicals and the stuff act upon the proteins move. I have my movement. All the DNA is doing, just like God, is saying, okay, I'll give you more of that. That's what you asked for. I'll give you more of that. More and more and more and more. DNA doesn't really care if what I'm digging is my own grave. You know. So, proteins have this movement, and proteins can respond in one of three ways. One that we're just going to put on the shelf because it's irrelevant is the neutrality. If you throw something at me that just doesn't matter, that's just called neutral. So it's not going to move me in any direction. We're just going to put that over there. Lots of stuff in life is neutral. There are things, another scientific term, of sustenance and nurturance. a particle of food, a molecule of oxygen. These are yummy things to proteins. Proteins say, oh, I like that. That looks good. I think I'll move towards that. So let's just say it's oxygen for the sake of, for the sake of a point I'm going to make later. Oxygen. Little molecule of oxygen comes along and says, ooh, hi, protein. Protein says, ooh, I like that. That feels, and I know that to be sustaining and nurturing. I'm going to move toward it. I'm going to open up. I'm going to move towards that thing. Over here is the other mechanism of the movement of proteins, and that is to toxicity. So something not so pleasant, like, let's say, carbon dioxide. Not good. We don't like that. We don't need that. It doesn't help. It actually kills things off in our world. A little carbon dioxide comes along. The protein says, ooh, no, I got to move away from that. I need to protect myself from that. So we have movement towards sustenance, protection from toxicity. These are the only two movements a protein can make. What does that remind you of? It reminds me of love and fear. Guess what? I can't move in both directions at the same time. That is not a platitude. That is not a bumper sticker. That is a law. I can move towards love, or I can protect myself from fear. Period. Now, protecting yourself from fear, very good thing. When there's something to be afraid of. When there's really something dangerous or treacherous, or even as innocuous as just not sustaining. Right? So I protect myself in that way. Everything else, love. Move towards love. If I need to protect myself from something, say it's the fight or flight response. Everybody know what that is, right? Fight or flight. If I'm in danger, real danger, the blood flow in my body is going to suddenly run to all my limbs so that I can do the, well, obviously, I just revealed a lot about myself. I guess I'm a fleer rather than a fighter. I don't know. It's never really been, put to the test, but I don't know. I mean, that's a test I don't really need to find that out about myself. But at any rate, it's good for the example. Right. Blood will go to one of three places in general. The brain, for keeping things running. The limbs, and the viscera. This is where sustenance and nurturance is taken care of. This is where the breath of life fills me up and grabs that oxygen molecule and turns it into successful protein movement, right? So if I have to run away from something, I am not taking in love. I am not taking in sustenance. Very good for when I'm being chased by the assailant who would rob me of my life. But guess what? The system doesn't have an intelligence enough to go beyond the intelligence that we guide it with. Which means if I tell myself I am in danger, the system will divert everything to the flight response and stop nurturing and sustaining me in order to save my life, even if the thought is, oh my God, how am I going to pay my rent next week? The system is magnificently complex and marvelous and elegantly simple at the same time. It just knows how to do all this. The challenge is that the guidance mechanism, that is us, is oriented towards fearful responses when there is nothing to be afraid of. And that consciousness is supported out there in the world. Separation, we are different, this will never work, I had a client the other day, oh, God bless her that I'm bringing her into this thing. Well, if she ever hears this talk, she'll forgive me. Struggling with a challenge in a relationship, and I was suggesting some forgiveness work, and I even gave her the outline of how it works and what to do. I said, I'll email you the form to use, how to give forgiveness. Takes you through angry, I'm angry that, and I'm sad that, and then the deep desire of my heart is that. And she said to me, well, what if I'm not ready to forgive? And I said, oh, ask me that after you've done it. That wasn't enough for her. She said, well, what if it doesn't work? And I said, oh, ask me that after you've done it. And I think she had one other objection that was in the similar vein. And I said, look, I know what it was. She said, I need to understand. How many people relate to that? Oh, wrong. I said to her, honey, I cannot help you to understand. I cannot. I can, however, offer you freedom. Which would you prefer? She said, I don't know. And that's when my ire got up. I mean, now I'm like standing in my office. We're on the phone, I think. And I'm like standing up now. And I'm like, look, I just said I cannot offer you understanding, which you can never have. I can offer you freedom. I can offer you freedom. Which do you prefer? I don't know. It's like, well. I mean, I posted something on Facebook the next day and she liked it, so I guess maybe I didn't. And I sent her the forgiveness outline and she sent me back an email that said, thanks. So, the rest, the rest is up to her. And you know what? I would not be able to make such great fun of her if this were not me at a time in my life. This has been me. And I can stand here and tell you, this is no longer me. I do not live there. Why? Because I have done the work. And I've done it over and over and over and over again because it's not magic. And because my DNA keeps replicating and replicating and replicating the proteins and does not care if I am breathing in love or breathing away from fear. It doesn't care. So I have to care. I have to care. You don't need to know how to do this. That's the message of the day. You do not need to know how. If nothing else, take a breath. I'm totally serious, guys. This is not a platitude and it's not a bumper sticker. This is an instruction manual. How to Live a Masterful Life by Dr. Michael Lennox. It is 1 page long. It has 1 page in it and it says, be conscious of your breathing. That is it. Because remember the protein. If you send the protein a molecule of oxygen, it will open up and move towards the love. That is all you have to know. Thank you very much.